The evening air hung thick and heavy over Route 9, carrying the smell of diesel and the distant promise of rain. It was the kind of October night that settled into your bones, where the temperature couldn't decide if it was late summer or early fall, and the sky bruised purple at the edges as the sun retreated behind the tree line. The Compass Tavern sat alone at a crossroads, literally and figuratively. It was the kind of establishment that had survived 3 recessions, 2 ownership changes, and countless attempts by the county to shut it down for one violation or another. The wooden sign outside a faded ship's compass, with the end pointing decidedly east, creaked in the breeze. The parking lot was mostly gravel and memory, with a few sad islands of cracked asphalt where cars used to park before the interstate bypass had stolen most of the through traffic. Inside the bar was a study in comfortable decay. The floor was original hardwood from 1947, worn smooth by 79 years of boots, sneakers, and the occasional high heel. The bar itself was cherrywood scarred and stained, but still solid, still doing the job it had been built to do. Neon beer signs flickered in the windows, casting pools of amber and blue across the scuffed surface of empty tables. It was 7:30 on a Tuesday, and the place was nearly empty. Nearly, but not quite. Tom Hutchins stood behind that cherrywood bar, polishing a glass that didn't need polishing. He was 52 years old, with the kind of face that had seen things it wished it could forget. Prematurely gray hair cropped military short out of habit rather than regulation. His hands, broad and scarred across the knuckles, moved in practiced circles. Polish, inspect, set down, pick up another, repeat. It was meditation. It was routine. It was how he kept the ghosts at bay. The door opened, admitting a shaft of dying sunlight and a figure that moved with deliberate care. Evelyn Blackwood was 78 years old, and she carried those years like a soldier carries a heavy pack. Necessary, earned, impossible to set down. She stood 5'6", though age had stolen an inch or two from her spine. Her hair was steel gray, cut short in a practical style that framed a face of sharp angles and sharper eyes. She wore a simple navy blue cardigan over a white blouse, dark slacks, and shoes that were sensible rather than stylish. In her right hand, she gripped a wooden cane worn smooth by use, the handle shaped by her palm. Over years of bearing weight, it was never meant to carry. But it was her eyes that stopped you if you bothered to look. They were pale gray, the color of winter clouds, and they held a depth that was unsettling. They weren't cold, they weren't warm. They were simply observant, taking in everything, calculating angles and distances and threat assessments even when there was nothing to assess. Tom looked up, and something in his chest eased. She'd come. Part of him, the part that still woke up at 3 a.m. in a cold sweat, had worried she wouldn't. "Your usual spot, Ms. Blackwood." She nodded once, a small, economical movement, and made her way to the corner table. It took her time. Her right hip didn't bend the way it used to hadn't since 1975, and each step was a negotiation between will and flesh. Tom watched without watching, ready to help if needed, knowing better than to offer if she didn't ask. She lowered herself into the chair with a barely audible sigh, hooking her cane on the table's edge. From her pocket, she withdrew a sealed envelope, cream-colored paper, the kind you use for important things. Her name was written on the front in her own handwriting, along with the date. Tomorrow's date. Tom. Her voice was a low rasp textured by decades of cigarettes she'd quit in 1982, and the kind of screaming you do when the morphine runs out and you're still 3 days from extraction. It was a voice that commanded attention without raising volume. Tom approached, drying his hands on a towel. "Tomorrow morning," she said, sliding the envelope across the scarred wood. "Not tonight. Tomorrow after 9 a.m. you open this. Understand?" He looked at the envelope, at her face, at the way her hands rested flat on the table with a finality that made his chest tighten. "Ms. Blackwood, if there's something. Tomorrow, Tom. That's all." He picked up the envelope. It was heavier than it should be. He tucked it into the inside pocket of his vest, the one over his heart, and nodded. "Water, please." He brought her a glass of ice water, the condensation already forming on the outside. She wrapped both hands around it, and for just a moment she closed her eyes. The weight seemed to lift from her shoulders. Her breathing evened out. When she opened her eyes again, there was something different there. Peace. Acceptance. The look of someone who has carried a burden for miles and can finally see the place they're allowed to set it down. Tom wanted to ask. Years of intelligence training told him to ask, but the look on her face stopped him. "You seem lighter tonight," he said instead. "Almost peaceful." She smiled, and it transformed her face. You could see the young woman she'd been, the one who'd walked into a Navy recruiter's office in 1966 and changed the trajectory of her entire life. "I am Tom. Finally made peace with some ghosts." She reached up and touched a small silver locket that hung around her neck, something he'd never seen her wear before. Her thumb traced its edge once, twice, and then her hand fell back to the table. Outside, the purple sky deepened to black. Inside the compass and tavern, the neon signs buzzed and flickered. Tom went back to polishing glasses. Eve sat with her water and her memories, and for exactly 12 minutes, the world was quiet. Then the motorcycles arrived. The sound came first at a low rumble that built and built until it rattled the beer signs in the windows. 7 bikes, big ones, the kind that cost more than most people's cars and sounded like artillery fire when they revved. They pulled into the gravel lot in a V formation, deliberately intimidating, and killed their engines in sequence. The sudden silence was almost worse than the noise. The door swung open and they entered like a conquering army. 7 men, all leather and denim, and the kind of swagger that comes from never being told no. They wore the cuts of the Iron Fangs Motorcycle Club, a newer outfit that had been making noise up and down Route 9 for the past 3 years. Mostly veterans, mostly dishonorably discharged, mostly angry at a world that had promised them glory and delivered PTSD and unemployment instead. The man in front was built like a question mark, all shoulders and arms with narrow hips and long legs. His vest identified him as Grim, and the patches beneath told the story. Army Ranger Tab, Iraq deployment patch. A dishonorable discharge wasn't something you advertised, but it hung on him anyway, invisible and heavy. His face was all hard lines and harder eyes, 36 years old, but looking 50. Dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, tattoos crawling up his neck, and a jaw that looked like it had been broken and set wrong more than once. Behind him, his crew. Younger, meaner, hungry for violence the way some men hunger for food or sex or meaning. They took up space at the bar, loud and deliberate. Tom approached with the kind of careful neutrality he'd learned in hostile territory. "What can I get you, gentlemen?" Grim looked at him, then past him, his eyes scanning the bar. They landed on Eve in her corner, a 78-year-old woman with a glass of water and a cane, and something in his face shifted. He'd found his entertainment for the evening. "Beer, whatever's cold." His voice was gravel and old cigarettes. "And tell me something. When did this place become a nursing home?" His crew laughed, that pack animal sound that isn't really about humor. Tom set down 7 beers with hands that wanted to shake, but didn't. "She's a regular. Been coming here longer than you've been riding, I'd imagine." "A regular." Grim picked up his beer, but didn't drink. "Hear that, boys? We got ourselves a regular. What's next? Wheelchair, ramps, bedpans?" More laughter. Eve didn't look up. She was studying her water glass like it contained the secrets of the universe, watching the condensation trail down the sides in slow rivers. Tom tried once more. "Gentlemen, let's keep it friendly. Everyone's welcome here, but we respect." "Respect." Grim cut him off, his eyes never leaving Eve. "You want to talk about respect, barkeep? Let me tell you about respect." He pushed away from the bar and walked toward Eve's table. His boots were loud on the hardwood. Each step deliberate, predatory. He stopped at her table, his shadow falling across the scarred wood like a stain. "What's a fossil like you doing in a place like this?" Eve finished watching a drop of water make its journey from rim to table. Only then did she raise her eyes. When she looked at him, Grim felt something he didn't expect. Not fear, not even defiance, just observation. Like she was cataloging him. Threat assessment, capability analysis. The look a scientist gives a specimen. "Drinking water," she said quietly. "Minding my own business. I'd recommend the same." The suggestion that he should leave her alone landed like a slap. His crew had followed him over, forming a loose semicircle. They were watching. He needed a reaction. Needed to prove something, though, if you'd asked him what he couldn't have said. "You got a mouth on you, Grandma. This ain't a place for old ladies. This is a real bar. For real people. I've been coming here since before you were born, son. I have as much right to this seat as you do to that attitude." Son. She'd called him son. Something in Grim's chest went red and hot and angry. His mother had left when he was 6, joined the Navy, and never came back. And here was this old woman, this stranger, using that word like she had any right. He reached out and grabbed her cane, yanking it from where it hung on the table's edge. It clattered to the floor, the sound sharp and mean in the quiet bar. "Whoops, looks like you dropped something. You gonna pick that up? Or you need one of the boys to call your nurse?" His crew laughed, encouraged. Tom started to move from behind the bar, but one of the bikers, a wall of meat named Brick, stepped in his path. Not threatening, just present, a warning. Eve looked at her cane on the floor. Then she looked at Grim. Her face showed nothing. Not anger, not fear, just that same flat assessment. She leaned forward in her chair, the movement slow and obviously painful. Her hip protested with a deep ache that shot down her right leg and up into her spine. Her knee, a roadmap of surgical scars hidden beneath her slacks, sent complaints that she'd learned to ignore decades ago. She gripped the arm of the chair, knuckles going white, and lowered herself down to one knee. The bar was silent except for her breathing steady and controlled despite the pain. Her fingers found the smooth, worn wood of the cane's handle. The handle had been shaped by her grip over the years, the grain polished by palm sweat and time. As she gripped it, muscle memory older than most of the people in this room took over. She pushed herself upright. It took effort, visible effort. A sheen of sweat appeared at her hairline. Her jaw clenched just enough to see the muscle work beneath the skin. Grim saw the struggle, and his grin widened, revealing teeth that were more stained than white. This was what he'd been looking for. Weakness. Proof that he was still strong, still capable, still worth something. He saw a frail, disabled old woman, easy prey for an evening's entertainment. He didn't see the steel underneath. Couldn't see the discipline forged in crucibles he couldn't possibly imagine. Didn't know that pain was an old companion to her, familiar as breathing, something she'd learned to compartmentalize in rooms of her mind he'd never even know existed. "See," Grim announced to the room, to his crew, to himself. "Pathetic. You should be at home in your rocking chair, Grandma, not taking up space in a real bar." Eve placed the cane deliberately beside her chair again. When she spoke, her voice was even, measured. The voice of someone who had given orders in situations where a raised voice meant death. "This bar is for anyone who wants a quiet drink. I'm not bothering you. I'd appreciate the same courtesy." Not bothering him. The dismissal in those words was worse than any insult. She wasn't engaging. She was enduring. And Grim, who had been enduring for most of his adult life, didn't know what to do with that. Tom watched from behind the bar, his hand resting near the old Louisville slugger he kept under the counter. He'd seen combat. He knew the smell of violence before it happened, the way the air changes. It was changing now. Grim stared at Eve, at this old woman who refused to give him what he needed. His frustration curdled into something darker. Genuine anger, real rage. He needed to see fear, needed to prove his dominance not just to her, but to his crew, to the room, to the universe that had taken everything from him and given nothing back. His eyes fell on Eve's simple navy blue cardigan. It was buttoned up to her neck, modest and proper, the kind of thing old women wear. Something about it enraged him further. The propriety, the dignity, the refusal to acknowledge him as a threat. "What are you hiding under all that, old-timer?" His voice had gone low and mean. "What else you got tucked away?" "Depends colostomy bag." His crew snickered, encouraged by his escalation. Eve's eyes hardened, just a fraction. Just enough that if you were watching, if you knew what to look for, you'd see something cold and dangerous spark in those gray depths before being extinguished behind decades of discipline. "Don't." The word was not a plea. It was a command, spoken with an authority that felt utterly out of place coming from the small woman in the corner. It was the voice of someone who had given orders that sent men into darkness and brought them back. The voice of someone who had said don't and been obeyed by people with guns and rank and power. The command only enraged Grim further. Who was this old woman to tell him what to do? Who was she to use that tone, that voice, like she had any authority over him? In a swift, violent motion, he grabbed the front of her cardigan with both hands. "I'll do what I want." He yanked hard. The cheap buttons, 40 years old if they were a day, couldn't take the strain. They popped free with sharp clicks scattering across the floor like discarded teeth. One hit the brass footrail of the bar and pinged a small, bright sound in the heavy silence. The cardigan fell open, revealing her white blouse beneath. But the violence of the motion had pulled her forward in her chair, and her blouse, tucked carefully into her slacks, had come partially untucked. Grim stared. On her left shoulder, visible through the thin fabric of her blouse, was a tattoo, faded by decades of sun and age but still clear enough to make out. A Navy anchor, simple and stark. He'd expected to embarrass her, to reveal old lady things, the physical deterioration that comes with age. Instead, he'd found something that didn't fit, something that made him pause. Well, well. He grabbed her blouse, now his fingers curling in the fabric. "Navy girl, what, you file papers somewhere, serve coffee to the real sailors." Tom started forward. "That's enough. Stay there, barkeep." One of the crew, a man called Razor, moved to intercept. Not touching Tom, just present, just in the way. Grim looked at Eve, at the tattoo, at this old woman who still wouldn't show him fear. He needed more, needed to break through whatever armor she wore, needed to win. "Let's see what else you're hiding." With a harsh tearing sound, the kind that makes your teeth hurt, he ripped her blouse open from collar to waist. More buttons scattered. These were smaller, cheaper, and they rolled across the floor like tiny wheels. The blouse fell open. Eve sat there exposed, her thin ribcage visible beneath an old white undershirt. But it was what was on her right bicep that made the room go silent. A tattoo, large, detailed, and unmistakable, even faded by 60 years. The Navy Intelligence Specialist insignia, an eagle with spread wings perched on an anchor, holding crossed quills in its talons. Below it, in carefully rendered numbers that had blurred slightly at the edges, 1966 to 2006, and beneath that the number 40. Grimm stared at it. He didn't recognize the insignia specifically. He'd been Army, not Navy, but he recognized the aura around it, the detail, the placement, the way it sat on her arm like a badge of honor rather than decoration. This wasn't some flash art from a boardwalk shop. This was official. This meant something. But it didn't fit. Couldn't fit. His brain, swimming in cheap beer and cheaper anger, couldn't reconcile the weak old woman with the symbol of service. Navy intelligence. He almost laughed. So you were a secretary, filed reports, typed memos, and you got yourself a little tattoo to pretend you were special. His fingers brushed against the faded ink, and for just a moment the bar dissolved around Eve. She wasn't in the compass anymore. She was 20 years old, sitting on a footlocker in a sweltering tent somewhere in the Mediterranean. A wiry man with steady hands worked a homemade tattoo gun, the needle buzzing like an angry hornet. It felt like fire, like 1,000 tiny cuts, like proof that she existed. Around her, 3 other intelligence specialists sat, all getting the same mark. They were young, impossibly young, and they believed they were immortal. They were part of something that the world would never know about, something that the history books would never record. The tattoo wasn't for recognition. It was for memory. For them. For the promise that they'd remember each other when the missions were over and the secrets were buried and they were old. 2 of them were dead now. One of cancer, one of a training accident that was only an accident if you didn't read the classified after-action report. The third lived in Montana and never answered Eve's letters anymore. The memory vanished as quickly as it came, leaving an ache of nostalgia and loss in its wake. Eve was back in the bar, her torn blouse hanging loose, Grimm's grimy finger still touching her tattoo. She looked at him with something that might have been pity. Grimm pulled back and laughed. It was a forced sound, dismissive, desperate to reclaim the moment. Intelligence, right. You probably sorted mail, made coffee for the real operators. This, he poked the tattoo hard enough to hurt. This is just stolen valor, old woman playing dress-up. The public humiliation was complete. Her history, her identity, the memory of her fallen colleagues was being mocked and degraded by a man who couldn't begin to comprehend its meaning. Behind the bar, Tom Hutchins had seen enough. The torn blouse, the revealed tattoo, the finger poking sacred skin. It was a line crossed, and not just any line. This was the line. His hand moved to the pocket over his heart, feeling the weight of the envelope she'd given him. Tomorrow. She'd said tomorrow, but tomorrow didn't matter if she didn't survive tonight. His mind flashed back, sudden and unwelcome. Unwelcome to a night 15 years ago, 2011. Tom had been back from Iraq for 6 months and he was drowning. The kind of drowning where your lungs were full of air, but you still couldn't breathe. He'd seen things in Fallujah, done things, lost people, and the prescribed pills and the mandated therapy sessions weren't touching the core of it. He'd come to the compass, which was under different ownership then, with a .45 and a plan. Not inside, he wasn't going to make that kind of mess, but out back in the alley where they kept the dumpsters, where nobody would find him until morning. He'd sat on the ground, his back against brick, still warm from the day's sun, and he'd taken the gun from his waistband, safety off, round-chambered. He'd put it under his chin finger on the trigger, and he'd tried to think of a reason not to pull it. You won't find one, you know. The voice had come from the mouth of the alley. An old woman stood there backlit by the parking lot lights. She'd walked right up and sat down next to him, her back against the same brick, like this was the most natural thing in the world. You won't find a reason, she repeated. Not tonight. Your brain's been lying to you for months, telling you the world's better without you. Tonight it's louder than usual. You won't outthink it. Tom had stared at her, the gun still under his chin. But here's what I know. She'd pulled a cigarette from her pocket, even though she hadn't smoked in decades, and lit it with a hand that didn't shake. Right now you think you're alone. You think nobody understands. You think you're the only one who's seen what you've seen, felt what you've felt. She took a drag, exhaled slowly. I was in Beirut in '82, October 23rd. I was running signals intelligence for the Marine barracks. 241 men died because I missed something. One signal, one intercept I should have caught. For 3 years after I had a gun in my mouth more times than I can count. Tom's finger had eased off the trigger. You know what stopped me? She turned to look at him, really look at him. Spite, pure spite. I decided that I'd be damned if I let my last act be proving right everyone who said I didn't belong in intelligence. So I got up the next day, and the next. And eventually I found other reasons, better reasons. But spite worked when nothing else did. They'd sat there for 6 hours. She didn't try to take the gun, didn't call anyone, just sat and talked. About Beirut, about the weight of other people's lives, about the peculiar courage it takes to get up the next morning. When the sun came up, Tom had put the gun back in his waistband safety on. She'd stood up her hip, protesting even then, and reached into her pocket. This is my personal number, she'd said, handing him a laminated card. If you ever need to talk, but also if I'm ever in real danger, the kind police can't handle. You call this number, you tell them my name, that's all you have to do. Why, he'd asked. She'd smiled, sad and knowing. Because you're going to live, and one day you'll need to help someone else live. Consider this your first mission briefing. She'd walked away, and Tom had eventually gone home, went to better therapy, found a purpose. Bought the compass 5 years later when the previous owner retired. And he'd kept that card in his wallet, transferred it to every new wallet, never forgot where it was. Until tonight, he'd thought it was just the kindness of an old veteran. A gesture, a symbol. Now watching Grim mock her tattoo, watching her sit there with torn clothes and exposed history, Tom knew better. His loyalty to Eve, to this quiet, dignified woman who had saved his life without asking for anything in return, solidified into cold, hard resolve. He moved. Fast. Into the back office, a cluttered room barely bigger than a closet. The door stayed open just a crack. His hands were shaking, not with fear, but with a righteous fury that tasted like copper in his mouth. He fumbled for his wallet, found the card. The lamination was worn at the edges, the number faded, but still legible. He dialed on his cell phone, his heart hammering against his ribs hard enough to hurt. It rang once. Naval Special Warfare Command, secure operations. Authentication required. The voice was completely calm, professional, devoid of emotion. The voice of someone for whom 3 a.m. emergency calls were routine. Tom's mouth went dry. He'd expected. What? A veteran's crisis line. Some automated system. My name is Tom Hutchins. I'm calling about Evelyn Blackwood. There was a pause. Not confusion. Something else. Something that felt like the moment before lightning strikes. Sir, spell that name. Slowly. Blackwood. Evelyn, she's... Tom looked through the crack in the door, saw Grim grabbing Eve's arm. She's being assaulted. Bikers. 7 of them. They ripped her shirt, they're dragging her. Location. The single word cut through his panic like a blade. The Compass Tavern, Route 9, 20 miles north of... We have your GPS, sir. Hold the line. Tom heard typing, fast professional typing, then an alert sound, high and urgent like a submarine klaxon. Sir, I'm transferring you to Warcom Level 1 operations. Do not hang up this call. Click, a new voice. Female. Ice-cold authority wrapped in professional calm. This is Commander Sterling, Naval Special Warfare Group 7. You stated that Evelyn Blackwood is under physical assault. Yes. They tore her clothes. They're mocking her. One of them has her by the arm. The voice changed, just slightly, emotion bleeding through the professional veneer. Sir, I need you to look at her right shoulder. Is there a tattoo visible? An eagle and anchor. Tom looked through the crack. Yes, Navy intelligence insignia. He heard something. Might have been a sharp intake of breath. Might have been something else. GPS confirmed. We have air assets 12 minutes out. Ground QRF 18 minutes. This line stays open. If you observe weapons of any kind, you will hear the code phrase, Nightingale down, and you will take cover immediately. Do you understand? Who is she? Ushinon, Tom asked, his voice barely a whisper. Who is Evelyn Blackwood? There was a pause. When the commander spoke again, her voice carried weight that had nothing to do with rank. She's the reason I exist, sir. Now stay on this line and keep eyes on her. The line didn't go dead. Tom could hear background noise, organized chaos, voices giving orders, and then he heard it clear as day. Initiate silent sentinel protocol. Authorization code, whisper actual. Subject is Evelyn Blackwood, Senior Chief ONI Black, Operations Division, retired. Yes, that Blackwood. Alert all SEAL Team 7 personnel. Full loadout. I want wheels turning in 4 minutes. Commander, another voice said, younger, uncertain. She's 78 years old. Are you sure we need full QRF for... She's 78 and she spent 40 years making sure people like you could do your job. So yes, we're rolling full QRF. She's earned that and more. Now move. Tom heard running feet, heard someone say, Jesus Christ, the silent warrior is in trouble. He looked through the crack in the door. Out in the bar, Grim had grabbed Eve by her tattooed arm and was pulling her toward the exit. Eve wasn't fighting back. She was just looking at Grim with that same flat assessment like she was solving a complex equation. Tom gripped his phone tighter and did what he'd been ordered to do. He watched, and he waited. 18 minutes. The clock on the wall ticked forward each second, measured and waited. 16 minutes now. Outside gravel crunched under boots as Grim dragged Evelyn Blackwood toward the door, toward the darkness, towards something he thought would prove he still mattered. He had no idea what was coming. None of them did. The October night swallowed them whole the moment they stepped through the door. Grim's hand was iron around Eve's arm, his fingers digging into the exact spot where the Navy intelligence insignia set faded on her skin. He pulled and she followed, not because she was weak, but because resistance at 78 with a damaged hip meant falling, and falling on gravel at her age meant broken bones and hospitals and questions she didn't want to answer. So she walked, limped really, each step a negotiation between her will and her body's limitations. The parking lot stretched before them, a wasteland of gravel and potholes illuminated by a single flickering light pole that had been meaning to die for the better part of a decade. The 7 motorcycles sat in their V-formation chrome, catching what little light remained, looking like metal predators at rest. Grim's crew followed behind, emboldened by their leader's violence, hungry for whatever came next. They'd seen this before, some mouthy drunk who needed teaching, some vagrant who didn't know his place. Always ended the same way. A beating, a warning, the satisfaction of proving they still mattered in a world that had decided they didn't. But something was different tonight. The old woman wasn't begging, wasn't crying, wasn't even afraid. She just walked with that measured limp, her torn blouse hanging open, her dignity somehow intact despite everything. 50 feet from the bikes, Grim stopped. He released her arm and shoved, not hard enough to make her fall, but hard enough to make her stumble. She caught herself on her cane, righted herself, and turned to face him. The light from the compass spilled weakly across the lot, casting everything in shades of amber and shadow. Eve's face was half in darkness, half illuminated, and her eyes were steady. "This is how it goes, Grandma," Grim said, cracking his knuckles. "You disrespected us in there, made us look like fools. Now we teach you what happens when old people forget their place." His crew formed a loose semicircle, blocking any route back to the bar. Not that she could run, not that she would. Eve looked at each of them in turn, reading them, calculating, old habits from a lifetime of assessing threats and determining responses. 2 of them were high on something, probably meth, based on the jaw clenching and dilated pupils. 3 were just drunk and stupid. One standing at the back looked uncomfortable, didn't want to be here, would run if things got too bad. And Grim. Grim was something else entirely. He wasn't high or drunk enough to explain the rage rolling off him in waves. This was deeper, personal, old. "You want to know why I'm so calm?" Eve asked. Her voice carried in the still air, clear and measured. Grim blinked, surprised by the question. "What? You asked me earlier if I was crazy. I'm not. I'm calm because I've been in worse spots than this. Much worse." He laughed, but it was hollow. "Right. What, some VA hospital got too rowdy? Someone steal your pudding cup. I've had guns to my head in places you've never heard of. I've been interrogated by professionals who made your worst nightmare look like amateur hour. So forgive me if 7 bikers in a parking lot doesn't particularly frighten me." The crew shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the script. Victims were supposed to beg, to plead, to cry, not lecture them about comparative threat assessment. Grim took a step forward, his hand balling into a fist. "You got a real mouth on you for someone about to get the beating of her life." Probably. The admission surprised him. He'd expected denial, defiance, something to push against. Instead, she just agreed and stood there waiting. "You were a soldier, weren't you?" Eve's voice was softer now. "I can see it, the way you stand. The training underneath all that anger." Grim froze. "How the fuck do you know that?" "Same way I know you're carrying weight that has nothing to do with tonight. Same way I know this isn't really about me. You're angry at someone else. Someone you can't hurt because they're already gone." The accuracy of it landed like a physical blow. For a moment, just a moment, the rage on Grim's face cracked, and something else showed through. Pain, loss. The kind of wound that never heals because you keep picking at it. "Shut up," You don't know anything about me. Maybe not, but I know anger. I've lived with it, carried it, let it poison decades of my life. And I'm looking at someone doing the same thing. One of the crew, a younger man with a spider web tattooed on his neck, spoke up. Grim man, she's old. Maybe we should just... I said, shut up! Grim's voice cracked. He turned back to Eve and something desperate was in his eyes now. My mother abandoned me. Just walked out when I was a kid. You want to psychoanalyze that? Eve's expression changed, softened. What was her name? What does it matter she's gone? Been gone 30 years. It matters. Tell me her name. Volkov. The name came out bitter and hard like swallowing glass. Katrina Volkov. Said she was joining the Navy. Never came back. Never called. Never wrote. Just fucking gone. Eve's eyes closed for just a moment. When she opened them, they were wet. When did she leave? 1996, I was 6 years old. Old enough to remember her face. Old enough to remember her packing that duffel bag. Old enough to watch her drive away and never come back. Eve's hand moved to the locket around her neck. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside were two photographs, faded but clear. A young woman in Navy uniform. A small boy holding a toy soldier. She held it out to Grim. Your mother didn't leave you, son. She died 3 years before the day you remember. 1993, October 3rd, Mogadishu, Somalia. She was 24 years old. Grim stared at the locket, his face going white. That's my mom. That's me. How do you have this? Because she carried it on her last mission. They sent it back with her personal effects, and I've been holding on to it for 33 years, waiting for the day I could give it to you. You're lying. But his voice had no conviction. He was looking at the photos at proof he couldn't deny. Your father remarried in 1995. Your stepmother, the woman you think was your mother leaving, that was her. She couldn't handle raising another woman's child. She left. Your father told you it was Katrina to protect you, thought it was kinder than the truth. Grim's knees buckled. He sat down hard on the gravel, still staring at the locket. Katrina Volkov was an intelligence specialist embedded with Army Rangers during Operation Gothic Serpent, the Battle of Mogadishu. She provided real-time signals intelligence that saved 11 Rangers before she was killed by small arms fire. She died protecting people, Grim. She didn't choose service over you. She died doing her job. One of the crew put a hand on Grim's shoulder. He shook it off violently. Why didn't anyone tell me? Why didn't you find me sooner? Because everything about her real assignment was classified. I couldn't tell a 6-year-old child that his mother died on a mission that officially never happened. By the time you were old enough to understand, your father had already created a different story. I respected that, but I watched over you. I made sure you had what you needed. The scholarship, Grim whispered. The money that came when Dad died. The college fund. Your mother's death benefits. I set up a nonprofit, the Katrina Volkov Memorial Scholarship. You were the first recipient. There have been 42 others since. Children who lost parents in service. I couldn't save your mother, but I could try to honor her memory by helping you and others like you. Grim was crying now, full body sobs. Everything he'd believed about his life, every bit of rage he'd built his identity on, was crumbling. Eve took a careful step forward. She loved you. She talked about you every single day, called you her little warrior. Wanted to teach you to be strong and kind, not one or the other. Both. That's what she wanted for you. I became neither, Grim choked out. Look at me. Look at what I am. I'm looking, and I'm seeing someone who's been in pain for 30 years, who built armor out of anger because nobody taught you a better way. But it's not too late. You can still become who she wanted you to be. She held out her hand. Stand up, Marcus. The use of his real name, the name his mother had given him, broke something final in him. He took her hand and she helped pull him to his feet. The gesture was symbolic. She didn't have the strength to actually lift him, but it meant everything. Inside the compass, Tom Hutchins stood with his phone pressed to his ear, listening to the organized chaos on the other end of the line. Through the crack in the office door, he could see the parking lot through the window, could see Eve and the bikers, couldn't hear the conversation, but could see the body language changing. Sir, what's the current situation? Commander Sterling's voice was crisp, professional, barely containing urgency. They're talking. It looks, I don't know, it doesn't look violent anymore. She's showing him something. A locket maybe. Can you see if she's injured? Torn clothes from earlier, but she's standing on her own. She's not in immediate danger. There was a pause. Tom heard rapid conversation in the background, orders being given. We're 14 minutes out. Ground team 18 minutes. Keep this line open and maintain visual. If anything changes, you tell me immediately. Roger that. Tom had learned military protocol in another life. It came back easily now. Sir, you said your name was Tom Hutchins. Yes, ma'am. Hutchins. That name is in Senior Chief Blackwood's file. You were one of her students. I was. She saved my life. Twice. Another pause. When Sterling spoke again, her voice carried a weight that had nothing to do with rank. Then you understand why we're coming. Why we'd roll out an entire QRF for a 78-year-old woman. I understand perfectly, Commander. Outside, the conversation continued. Marcus Volkov clutching his mother's locket like it was the only real thing in a world of shadows. Eve speaking quietly, telling him things about Katrina that only someone who'd been there could know. She was funny. Did you know that had this dry sense of humor that caught you off guard, made the Rangers laugh even in the worst situations? Marcus shook his head. I don't remember her laughing. I barely remember her at all. You were 3 when she died. 3-year-olds don't form a lot of permanent memories. What you remember of her leaving at 6, that was your stepmother. Your brain merged the two because it was less painful than accepting you lost your real mother before you could know her. Tell me about her. Please, tell me everything. And Eve did. Not stories about heroism or sacrifice. Small things, human things. How Katrina liked her coffee with too much sugar. How she sang off key when she thought no one was listening. How she carried Marcus's photo everywhere and kissed it before every mission. The crew stood in uncomfortable silence, witnessing something private and profound. One by one, they backed away, giving Grim and Eve space. This wasn't their business anymore. This was something else. Something sacred. Minutes ticked by. Tom watched through the window phone still pressed to his ear, counting down the arrival time. 12 minutes now. 11. Then he saw something that made his blood run cold. One of the bikers, the biggest one they called Brick, pulled something from his vest. Metal caught the light. A gun. Commander, Tom's voice was sharp. One of them just drew a weapon. The response was immediate. Do not engage. I repeat, do not engage. We are weapons free. Authorization code Nightingale down. Get down and stay down. Tom dropped behind the bar, his heart hammering. Through the window, he could see Brick approaching Eve and Marcus, the gun held low but visible. In the parking lot, Eve saw it too. Her body language changed instantly. Not fear, calculation. She stepped slightly in front of Marcus, putting herself between him and Brick. Put that away, she said calmly. There's been enough violence for one night. Brick's hand was shaking. He wasn't high, wasn't drunk. He was terrified. Terrified because his world had just shifted and he didn't know how to process it. You're some kind of spy, some kind of government secret agent. We assaulted a government agent. We're fucked. We're all fucked. You're not fucked. I already told you I'm not pressing charges. Bullshit. They're coming, aren't they? That's why you're so calm. You called for backup and now we're all going to prison. Eve's voice remained steady. I didn't call anyone, but yes, help is coming. And yes, you should put that gun away before they arrive. Because if they see you pointing a weapon at me, this ends very badly for you. How badly? They're SEAL's son, Tier 1 operators. If they perceive you as a lethal threat to me, you'll be dead before you finish pulling that trigger. And so will everyone standing near you. Is that what you want? Brick's hand shook harder. The gun wavered. I don't want to go to prison. I can't go back. I just got out 2 years ago. Then put it down. Right now, we can still walk away from this. A new sound cut through the night. Helicopter rotors. Distant, but getting closer fast. Brick's eyes went wide. They sent a helicopter for you. They sent more than that. And in about 20 seconds, this parking lot is going to light up like noon. If you're holding that gun when it does, you're a dead man. The helicopter sound grew louder. Then, like a switch being flipped, the parking lot exploded with light. Not from above, from the road. 5 black SUVs came screaming into the lot, their tactical lights turning night into surgical day. Brick spun toward them, the gun coming up instinctively. Everything happened in slow motion and all at once. 5 vehicle doors opened in perfect synchronization. 20 Navy SEALs emerged, and every single one of them had their weapon trained on Brick. Drop the weapon! Drop it now! The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, amplified and authoritative. Brick froze, caught in a dozen laser sights, understanding with perfect clarity that he was one twitch away from death. Eve stepped forward directly into the line of fire, her hands raised. Stand down, her voice cut through the chaos. He's not a threat, stand down, a woman's voice replied, sharp with command. Ma'am, step away from the armed subject. Commander Sterling, I know that's you. I'm ordering you to stand down. This man is not a threat. He's scared and he's stupid, but he's not a threat. A pause. Then, ma'am, with respect, you don't have the authority to. I have 40 years of authority, and I'm using every bit of it right now. Stand down. Another pause, longer this time. Then the woman who'd been giving orders stepped forward into the light. Commander Kate Sterling. She kept her weapon trained on Brick, but her eyes were on Eve. Senior Chief, that man has a gun pointed in your direction. That man is about to drop his gun. Aren't you, Brick? Brick was crying now, overwhelmed and terrified. The gun fell from his fingers and clattered on the gravel. He sank to his knees, hands on his head. Smart boy, Eve said softly. Then louder. He's down. Weapon is clear. Nobody needs to die tonight. Kate held position for 3 more seconds. Then, secure the weapon. Detain all subjects. Non-lethal protocols. 4 SEALs moved forward with practiced efficiency. They had Brick zip-tied and on his face in under 10 seconds. The other bikers received the same treatment, professional and impersonal. Marcus was on his knees, still hands raised, the locket still clutched in his right fist. When a SEAL approached him, Eve spoke up. That one stays with me. Kate walked forward slowly, her weapon now holstered, but her hand near it. She stopped 10 feet from Eve and, for the first time, really looked at her. At the torn clothes, the exposed tattoos. The way she stood with more dignity and ruin than most people managed in their finest moments. Are you hurt? I'm fine. They tore your clothes. They had a weapon. And now they don't. The situation is resolved. Kate studied her for a long moment. Then she did something that surprised everyone. She brought her heels together with a sharp crack and saluted. Sharp. Precise. Perfect. Senior Chief Evelyn Blackwood, Commander Catherine Sterling, SEAL Team 7. It's an honor to finally meet you. Eve returned the salute, slowly, understanding dawning on her face. Sterling, Emma's daughter. Yes, ma'am. The 2 women looked at each other, and years of history passed between them without words. Kate lowered her salute and stepped closer. I've been looking for you for 18 months. Ever since I made commander and got clearance to pull the classified files. I know what you did. I know everything. Eve shook her head. You don't know everything. Nobody knows everything. I know enough. I know you came to every birthday until I was 18. I know you paid for my education. I know you saved my life in Afghanistan when I was 26. I know my mother was your friend, and you've spent 40 years honoring her memory by making sure I had every opportunity she wanted for me. Your mother earned that. You earned that. And you've earned this. Kate gestured to the 20 SEALs. We don't abandon our own, even retired, even when you tell us not to come, especially then. Marcus was staring at them both, understanding, finally clicking into place. You're not just some random veteran. She's a legend, Kate finished. One of the founding members of modern naval intelligence, 40 years of classified operations, 73 successful missions, 3 prevented nuclear incidents, 12 SEAL teams saved, 2,000 intelligence specialists trained, and 0 medals, 0 recognition because she declined every single commendation. She turned to Marcus specifically. And your mother, Katrina Volkov, was one of the specialists she trained. They served together from 1990 to 1993. Senior Chief Blackwood was the one who identified Katrina's body after Mogadishu. She's been watching over you for 33 years because she promised your mother she would. Marcus looked at Eve with something approaching awe. Why do all this? Why care so much about strangers? Eve met his eyes. Because your mother died protecting people who needed protecting. Because Emma Sterling died the same way. Because in 40 years I sent 73 people into dangerous situations and some of them didn't come back. Those people had families, had children, had futures that got cut short. The least I could do was make sure their children had futures too. She reached into her torn blouse and pulled out a small card, handed it to Marcus. Katrina Volkov Memorial Scholarship. It's funded through a nonprofit I established. Currently helps 43 children of fallen service members. I'm dying, Marcus. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. I have maybe 2 weeks left. When I'm gone, I want you to run this foundation. Use it to help others the way it helped you. That's how you honor your mother, not with anger, with purpose. Marcus took the card with shaking hands. I don't know how. You'll learn, and Commander Sterling will help you. Won't you, Kate? Kate nodded. Yes, ma'am, whatever you need. The moment hung there fragile and profound. Then one of the SEALs, an older Master Chief, stepped forward. Senior Chief Blackwood. His voice was rough with emotion. I'm Ryan Peterson. My father was Jackson Peterson. He served under you in the Mediterranean, 1970 to 74. Eve's face lit with recognition. Jackie Little, Jackie Peterson, you're his son. Yes, ma'am, he passed 2 years ago, but he talked about you constantly. Said you were the best instructor he ever had. Said you saved his career a dozen times and his life twice. Everything I am as an operator, I learned from what he learned from you. Jackie was a good man. He was, because you taught him how to be. And he taught me, and I've taught others. That's your legacy, ma'am. Not just the operations, not just the lives saved, but the knowledge passed down. The skills that keep saving lives decades after you taught them. Eve's eyes were wet now. She nodded, unable to speak. Kate's radio crackled. She stepped away to answer. It had a brief conversation, then returned. Local law enforcement is inbound. We need to make decisions about charges. Eve looked at the bikers zip-tied on the ground, at Marcus still kneeling with his mother's locket, at Brick crying and terrified. No charges. Ma'am, these men have suffered enough. Marcus just learned the truth about his mother. Brick is a scared veteran who made a bad decision. The others were following orders. They need help, not prison. Get them into VA programs. PTSD treatment, the kind of support they should have gotten years ago. You're offering them redemption. I'm offering them what I wish someone had offered me 40 years ago, a chance to do better, to be better, purpose instead of punishment. Kate considered this. I'll make it happen, but they cooperate fully. VA treatment is non-negotiable, and if any of them comes near you again, they won't. Will you, Marcus? Marcus shook his head vigorously. No, ma'am, never, I swear. Then we're done here. Eve turned to Kate. Now get these men into proper custody, process them through VA intake, and let's all go home. I'm tired and I have exactly 13 days left. I'd like to spend them not in police stations. The finality of that statement silenced everyone. 13 days. She'd said it so matter-of-factly, like announcing the weather. Kate's professional mask cracked. Ma'am, is there anything we can do? Any treatment? No, I've made my peace. I've lived a full life. Done my job. Now it's time to let others carry the weight. She looked at Marcus, at Kate, at Peterson. Promise me something, all of you. Promise me you'll take care of each other, that you'll pass on what you've learned, that you'll make sure the next generation doesn't have to learn everything from scratch. That's how we win. Not by being irreplaceable, by making ourselves obsolete, by teaching so well that those who come after are better than we ever were. We promise, Kate said, her voice breaking. All of us, we promise. Eve nodded, satisfied. She looked tired now, the adrenaline wearing off, the pain returning. Kate saw it. Let's get you inside. Get you checked by our medic. I don't need a medic. I need my chair, my water, and Tom's terrible coffee. Despite everything that got a laugh, Kate offered her arm and Eve took it gratefully. Together they walked back toward the compass, leaving the SEALs to process the scene and the bikers to contemplate how close they'd come to death. Tom met them at the door, his face pale but relieved. You all right? I'm fine, Tom. Just needed to have a conversation, make some introductions. She settled into her corner chair with a sigh that came from somewhere deep. Tom brought water. Kate pulled up a chair beside her. Peterson stood nearby, protective. So, Eve said after a long drink, that was eventful. That's one word for it, Tom replied. You just diffused a hostage situation, prevented multiple deaths, and recruited your attackers into a veterans support program. All in about 30 minutes. 33 minutes, actually. I was counting. She looked at her watch. Which means I've successfully spent the last night of my life doing something that mattered. I'd call that a win. Last night, Kate leaned forward. Ma'am, you said you have 13 days. I lied, to keep you from hovering. It's closer to 3 days. Maybe 4 if I'm unlucky. The pain's been getting worse. I came here tonight to say goodbye to Tom, to sit in my spot one last time, to make peace with the ghosts. She looked around the bar at the scarred wood and flickering neon and the profound ordinariness of it all. Then those boys showed up and gave me one last mission, one last chance to do some good. So I'd say tonight worked out exactly as it was supposed to. Kate was crying now, not bothering to hide it. I just found you. I can't lose you already. You're not losing me. I'm leaving you everything you need. Tom has letters, 73 of them, one for each family I've been helping. Instructions for the foundation. Files on ongoing projects. Everything. She looked at Marcus, who'd been brought inside and now sat across the bar, still clutching the locket, still processing everything. And you, Marcus Volkov, You're going to run the Katrina Volkov Memorial Scholarship. You're going to help military children who lost parents. You're going to turn your anger into purpose. That's your job now. That's how you honor your mother. I don't know if I can. You can. Because she believed you could. And because I'm not giving you a choice. It's done. The lawyers have already drawn up the papers. You're the director, effective immediately. Marcus started crying again. Why me? Why trust me after what I did? Because someone trusted me once when I didn't deserve it. Because redemption only works if someone offers it. Because your mother would want you to have this chance. Take it. The bar fell quiet. Outside, the SEALs were loading the bikers into transport vehicles. Inside, 4 people sat with the weight of what had just happened. Eve looked at each of them in turn. Tom, who she'd saved from himself. Kate, who she'd watched grow from child to warrior. Peterson, who carried his father's legacy. Marcus, who she'd just handed a future. This is what legacy looks like, she said softly. Not monuments, not medals, not history books, just people helping people, passing knowledge forward, making sure the next generation doesn't start from zero. She finished her water and set the glass down with a soft click. Now, Tom, I'd like that terrible coffee you mentioned. Kate, stop crying and tell me about your team. Peterson, sit down and tell me about Jackie's last years. Marcus, come here and let me tell you more about your mother. And for the next hour, that's exactly what they did. They sat in a dive bar on Route 9 and they talked about the dead and the living, about sacrifice and service, about the quiet work that matters more than glory. 3 days later, Evelyn Blackwood died in her sleep with Tom and Kate on either side. But that night in the Compass, she was alive and laughing and exactly where she wanted to be, passing the torch, making sure the light didn't go out, doing the work that mattered. One last time. The funeral was held on a gray November morning at Arlington National Cemetery. Strings had been pulled, favors called in, regulations bent until they nearly broke. But when Commander Catherine Sterling wanted something done, it got done, Shemainas. She'd learned from the best. The ceremony was closed casket per Eve's explicit instructions, a simple Navy flag draped over dark wood. No religious service, no lengthy eulogies, no pageantry. Just the ceremony that every service member earned and the silence that Eve had preferred in life. But the people came anyway. They lined the path from the road to the gravesite in quiet rows, 2,000 of them. Intelligence specialists from 4 decades. SEALs she'd helped save. The 73 families she'd supported in secret for years. Students who'd become professors, analysts, commanders, people whose lives had been fundamentally altered by one woman's quiet determination to make the world slightly less dangerous. Marcus Volkov stood in the front row wearing a suit he'd bought specifically for this. Beside him, Kate Sterling, in full dress uniform, her face composed, but her eyes red. On her other side, Master Chief Peterson and Tom Hutchins, the 4 people she'd brought together in her final days. The honor guard performed the flag folding with mechanical precision. 21 rifles fired in salute, the sound sharp and final in the cold air. A lone bugler played taps the mournful notes, carrying across rows of white headstones that stretched to the horizon. When the folded flag was presented to Kate as the designated next of kin, she accepted it with hands that only shook slightly, held it against her chest, felt the weight of 40 years of service compressed into 13 folds of fabric. The ceremony concluded. The chaplain offered final words. The honor guard stepped back, and then something happened that wasn't in any regulation or protocol. One by one, the 2,000 attendees filed past the casket. Each placed a single white stone on the grave, an ancient tradition older than nations or militaries. A warrior's cairn, physical proof that someone had mattered, that someone was remembered, that a life of service was acknowledged even when it couldn't be celebrated. The stones accumulated, white and gray and smooth from rivers or rough from mountains. Each one a life touched, each one a quiet thank you. By the time the last person had passed, the grave was covered, a cairn of 2,000 stones that gleamed dully in the overcast light. Kate stepped forward. From her pocket, she withdrew her mother's dog tag, the one that had been returned from Beirut 43 years ago. She placed it carefully on top of the cairn. Together again, Mom, she whispered. Eve will take care of you now. Marcus placed his mother's locket beside the dog tag, the one Eve had carried for 33 years. She'll take care of you too, Mom. I promise I'll be what you wanted, both of you. Tom placed a small book, the last thing he'd read aloud to her in hospice. Raymond Chandler, because she'd loved detective novels and the way they made sense of chaos. Peterson placed a photograph, His father in young Navy uniform, standing beside a younger Eve, both of them smiling at some shared joke lost to time. Others came forward with their own tokens. Dog tags, photos, letters, small personal things that meant everything to someone. When it was done, the grave looked less like a burial site and more like a shrine. A testament to impact measured not in headlines but in individual lives altered for the better. The crowd dispersed slowly, reluctant to leave, reluctant to accept that someone so vital could simply be gone. Kate Marcus. Tom and Peterson were the last to remain. They stood in silence, each processing grief in their own way. Finally, Tom spoke. She left letters for all 73 families. I have them at the bar. She wrote them over the past 6 months after her diagnosis. Wanted to make sure everyone knew what their parents' sacrifice meant. What did mine say? Marcus asked quietly. I don't know. They're sealed. One for each family member with instructions to open them after the funeral. Kate looked at him. When can we get them? Tonight if you want. She also left something else. Instructions. For what she called Phase 2. Phase 2, Tom pulled a sealed envelope from his jacket. This is for you, Commander. She said to open it only after the funeral. Said it was the most important thing she'd ever ask you to do. Kate took the envelope with hands that wanted to shake. The paper was cream-colored expensive. Her name written in Eve's precise handwriting. She opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet and a flash drive. The letter was short. Kate, by the time you read this, I'll be gone and you'll be angry that I didn't let you help more in the end. Let go of that anger. I chose this. I chose to spend my last days doing work that mattered, rather than fighting a battle I couldn't win. The flash drive contains files, 73 of them. Each one documents a classified operation I ran between 1966 and 2006. Personnel involved, outcomes, lessons learned. I've spent 6 months getting them declassified with help from friends in high places. They're yours now. Use them. Teach from them. Make sure the next generation of intelligence specialists doesn't have to learn everything from scratch. Make sure the mistakes I made don't get repeated. Make sure the successes get built upon. You asked me once what legacy meant. This is it. Not monuments, not medals. Knowledge passed forward. Skills that keep saving lives long after the teacher is gone. You're going to do extraordinary things, Kate. You already have. But more importantly, you're going to teach others to do extraordinary things. That's the mission now. That's Phase 2. Make me proud. Make your mother proud. Make yourself proud. With love and respect, Evelyn. Kate read it twice. Then a third time. Then she had to stop because tears were making the words blur. What does it say? Marcus asked. She handed him the letter. Let him read it. Watched his face change as he processed Eve's final instructions. She's still giving orders, he said with something between a laugh and a sob. Even dead, she's still giving orders. That's because the mission doesn't end, Peterson said quietly. She understood that. The fight goes on, just with different people carrying the weight. Speaking of which, Tom pulled more envelopes from his jacket. These are yours, Marcus. Instructions for the Katrina Volkov Memorial Scholarship. She's left you everything. The nonprofit, the funds, the donor network. She's made you the executive director effective immediately. Marcus took the envelope with hands that shook. I can't do this. I don't know how to run a nonprofit. I barely know how to run my own life. You'll learn, Kate said. Same way all of us learn. By doing, by failing, by getting back up. And you won't be alone. Peterson, you're on the board of directors. Tom, you're treasurer. I'm chairman. We're all in this together. She planned this, Marcus realized. This whole thing. She knew exactly what she was doing when she gave me that locket. When she told me about Mom, she was recruiting me. Of course she was, Tom said. She was still running operations right up until the end. This was just her last one, getting all the pieces in place for Phase 2. They stood in silence processing the magnitude of what Eve had set in motion. Not just a scholarship fund, not just archived files, but a network of people committed to carrying forward her work. I have one more thing, Tom said. She recorded a video message, wanted it played at the first board meeting of the new foundation, which I guess is happening tonight if you're all available. They looked at each other, nodded. The Compass, 8 p.m., Kate said. We'll watch it together. That night, the four of them gathered in the back office of the Compass Tavern. Tom set up a laptop on the desk, inserted the flash drive Eve had given him separately, and opened the video file. Eve appeared on screen. She looked better than she had in her final days. This had been recorded maybe 2 months ago, when she still had some strength, some color in her face. She sat in what looked like her home, a plain wall behind her afternoon light coming through an unseen window. "Hello," she began, her voice steady. "If you're watching this, I'm dead, and you're sitting in Tom's office wondering what the hell I've gotten you into. Let me explain." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "For 40 years, I did work that couldn't be acknowledged, ran operations that couldn't be discussed, prevented disasters that history will never record. I'm not complaining. I chose this life, chose secrecy over recognition because the work mattered more than my ego. But secrecy has a cost. It means when I die, most of what I learned dies with me. All those lessons, all those techniques, all that institutional knowledge just gone. That's wasteful, inefficient, and I've never liked waste." She leaned forward slightly. "So I've spent my last year building something. Three things, actually. First, the Katrina Volkov Memorial Scholarship, which Marcus will run. It will help children of fallen service members get the education and support they need. Currently funded for 10 years. I expect you to keep it going longer. Second, the archives on the flash drive I gave Kate. 73 operations, all declassified, all yours to learn from. Use them to teach, to train, to make sure the next generation is better than we were. Third and most important, I've built you, the four of you, Tom, who learned that teaching saves lives, Kate, who learned that service is bigger than self, Peterson, who carries his father's legacy forward, and Marcus, who learned that redemption is possible if someone offers it." She smiled, that quiet smile that transformed her face. "You're my phase two. You're what continues after I'm gone. And here's what I need you to do." The video continued for another 20 minutes. Eve laid out specific instructions, the scholarship criteria, the archive protocols, how to recruit new board members, how to measure impact, how to scale the operation. But more than logistics, she talked about philosophy, about why service matters, about how knowledge compounds when it's shared, about the responsibility they now carried to make sure others didn't have to learn everything from scratch. "You're going to fail sometimes," she said near the end. "I failed plenty. Beirut still haunts me. Other operations I can't talk about even now. But you learn from failure. You document what went wrong. You make sure the next person doesn't repeat your mistakes. That's how progress happens. Incrementally, through accumulated wisdom." She looked directly into the camera as if she could see them watching. "I'm proud of all of you. Proud of who you've become. Proud of who you'll become. Don't waste time mourning me. I lived a full life and I'm satisfied with it. Take that energy and put it into the work, into helping others, into building something that lasts. And remember, you're not doing this for recognition. You're doing it because it needs doing, because you have skills and knowledge that others need, because service is the rent we pay for living on this earth, and I expect you to pay yours in full." She sat back, her expression softening. "Thank you for everything. Thank you for being the people I needed you to be. Thank you for making my last days meaningful. And thank you in advance for what you're about to do. The world won't know. History won't record it, but the people you help will know. And that's all that matters." The video ended. The screen went black. The four of them sat in silence, processing what they'd just heard. Finally, Kate spoke. "She just gave us marching orders from beyond the grave." "Yeah," Marcus said, wiping his eyes. "Yeah, she did." "So what do we do?" Tom asked. Peterson stood up. "We follow orders. We build what she asked us to build. We do the work." Kate nodded. "Phase 2 starts now. Marcus, you're officially the executive director of the Katrina Volkov Memorial Scholarship. Your first task is to review applications from this year's candidates. Peterson, you're in charge of outreach to military families. Tom, you're managing finances in this location as our meeting space. I'm chairman, and I'm recruiting instructors to teach from the archived operations." She looked at each of them. "We meet monthly. We document everything. We measure impact. We expand carefully. We do this right because she trusted us to do it right." "Understood." 3 voices answered in unison. "Understood." "Good." Kate pulled out a notebook. "Let's get to work." And they did. 6 months passed. The Compass Tavern changed, but slowly, organically. The wall behind the bar became a memorial. Photos of veterans, local and otherwise, arranged in careful rows. At the center, larger than the others, was Evelyn Blackwood, at age 25 in Navy uniform, unsmiling, but with a glint in her eyes that suggested she knew something you didn't. Below her photo, a brass plaque, Senior Chief Evelyn Marie Blackwood, 1948 to 2026, the Silent Warrior. 40 years, zero fanfare, infinite impact. The monthly meetings grew. What started as 4 people became 8, then 15, then 30. Veterans helping veterans. Intelligence specialists teaching the next generation. Families of the fallen finding community with others who understood. Marcus ran the scholarship fund with surprising competence. Turned out having a purpose beyond anger made him good at things. He'd helped place 12 kids in college in just 6 months, secured funding from 3 new donors, built a website and database to track outcomes. Kate used the declassified files to create a training program at the Naval Academy. Lessons from the silent era, she called it. Case studies from Eve's operations. What worked? What failed? Why? The courses filled immediately and waiting lists developed. Peterson recruited 43 families into the support network, connected parents who'd lost children with children who'd lost parents, built community from shared grief. Tom kept the compass running but transformed it into something more. The back room became a resource center, job boards, educational programs, counseling referrals, a place where veterans could come and find practical help without judgment. On the 6-month anniversary of Eve's death, they held a special meeting, all 30 current members, plus surprise guests. 5 of the Iron Fangs had shown up, not to cause trouble, to help. They'd all completed VOA treatment programs, all sober, all working, all trying to be better than they'd been. Brick worked construction and volunteered as a peer counselor at the VA. Spider helped Marcus with the scholarship website. The others contributed in small ways, showing up, being present, doing the work. Marcus stood at the front of the group to give the 6-month report. The Katrina Volkov Memorial Scholarship has assisted 43 families, 12 college placements, 8 vocational training programs, 23 families receiving direct financial assistance for education costs. We're on track to help 60 families by year end. He paused, emotional. My mother died 33 years ago. For most of my life, I thought she abandoned me. Spent decades being angry about it. That anger nearly destroyed me. Then Senior Chief Blackwood told me the truth. My mother didn't leave. She died protecting others, and she would want me to honor that by protecting others too. He held up the locket Eve had given him. I wear this every day. It reminds me that I have a choice. I can honor the dead by becoming bitter, or I can honor them by becoming better. I choose better. Every single day I choose better. The room was silent. Then Brick spoke up from the back. Same, I spent 2 years out of prison being angry that the world didn't give a shit about veterans. Then that night in the parking lot, Senior Chief could have destroyed me, could have sent me back to prison for the rest of my life. Instead, she offered me a chance, said I could still be better than my worst moment. So I'm trying. Every day I'm trying. Others shared similar stories. Moments when Eve had intervened, had taught, had helped, had given them tools to be better than they thought possible. Kate listened to all of it, thinking about the video message, about Eve's insistence that legacy wasn't about monuments or medals. It was about this: real people, real change, real impact. When the meeting ended, she stayed behind with Tom, Peterson, and Marcus. She was right, Kate said, about all of it. This matters more than any classified operation, more than any medal. We're changing lives. 43 families in 6 months, Tom agreed. If we keep this pace, that's nearly 90 families a year. In 10 years, almost 1,000. That's generational impact. She knew, Peterson said. She knew what we were capable of if someone just pushed us in the right direction. That's what the whole final night was about, pushing us into position, making us see what needed doing. Marcus nodded. Everything that happened was deliberate. She chose that night, chose that location. Knew we'd come, knew Tom would call, knew Kate would respond, orchestrated the whole thing as her final operation. They let that sink in. Eve Blackwood dying of cancer, spending her last night running one final op to ensure Phase 2 launched successfully. That's terrifying and inspiring in equal measure, Kate said. That's who she was, Tom replied. Terrifying and inspiring, right up to the end. A young woman approached, hesitant, maybe 22, fresh-faced, wearing a Navy uniform, petty officer 3rd class based on her rank insignia. Excuse me, ma'am, she addressed Kate. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to say thank you. For what? My mother was killed in Iraq in 2005. I was 8. The Volkov Scholarship paid for my college. Let me join the Navy without crushing debt. I'm in intelligence school now because of that support. Because Senior Chief Blackwood made sure my mom's death meant something. She gestured to Eve's photo on the wall. I never got to thank her, so I'm thanking you for continuing what she started, for making sure others get the same chance I got. Kate's throat was tight. What's your name? Petty Officer Sarah Chen, ma'am. Chen. The name hit like a physical blow. Kate looked at the young woman with new eyes. Who was your mother? Captain Rachel Chen, Army Intelligence. Killed in Fallujah. Kate's mind raced. Pulling out her phone, accessed the scholarship database Marcus had built, found the file, read the details. Rachel Chen, Army Intelligence. Killed 2005. Daughter Sarah, age 8 at time of death. Scholarship recipient 2013 to 2017. Full ride to University of Virginia. Majored in Middle Eastern Studies. Enlisted Navy 2018. Your mother was Army Intelligence. Yes, ma'am, she worked with Navy teams sometimes. I think she knew Senior Chief Blackwood, but I was too young to remember. Kate looked at Peterson, at Marcus, at Tom, saw the same realization dawning on all of them. 73 families, 73 operations. Eve had personally ensured that every single family of every person who died on her watch was taken care of. For 40 years. Quietly, secretly, until the day she died. Your mother was a hero, Kate said carefully, and Senior Chief Blackwood would be very proud of you. Thank you, ma'am. I just wanted you to know what this program means. It changed my life. It's changing lots of lives. She saluted and walked away young and earnest in carrying forward a legacy she didn't fully understand. The 4 founding members looked at each other. 73 families, Kate whispered. She really did it, kept track of every single one, made sure they were all taken care of. That's why she needed us, Marcus said. Because she's gone, but those families still need support. New families will need support. The work doesn't stop just because she's not here to do it. So we don't stop either, Tom said firmly. We keep building, keep expanding, keep honoring what she started. Peterson nodded. Phase 2 isn't just continuing her work. It's making sure there's a Phase 3 and a Phase 4, building something that outlasts all of us. Kate raised her water glass. The others followed suit. To Senior Chief Evelyn Blackwood, the silent warrior, who taught us that the highest service is the one nobody knows you rendered, who showed us that legacy is measured in lives changed, not monuments built, who trusted us to carry forward what she couldn't finish. To Eve, they said in unison. They drank, sat in comfortable silence, and then because work doesn't stop, they pulled out their laptops and got back to it. Applications to review, families to contact, programs to expand, lives to change, the quiet work, the important work, the work that mattered. Outside November, rain started falling. Inside the compass, the memorial wall glowed softly in the bar light. Eve's photo watched over them all, that slight smile suggesting she'd known all along how this would turn out. Her voice from the video message echoed in their minds. Service is the rent we pay for living on this earth. I expect you to pay yours in full. They were paying it every day. One family at a time, one veteran helped, one life changed. Not for glory, not for recognition, not for anything except the knowledge that it was the right thing to do. The silent service, the work that saves lives, the only legacy that mattered. And in a grave at Arlington, beneath 2,000 white stones and a dog tag and a locket and a book, Evelyn Blackwood rested. Her war was over. Theirs was just beginning. But she'd given them everything they needed to fight it. Knowledge, purpose, community, hope. The rest was up to them, and they would not let her down.